Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Stratazine podcast. I'm James Rognan. Today, I have with me, let's see here, we have Colton, Maya, right? Celeste, Tyler, and Addie. I pointed in all different directions on that one. Today, we're talking about crisis management and how it can turn into real public relation, like nightmares, right? Or problems. We're going to be talking about how it starts, how it gets amplified on social media, and even how like creators or social media managers, what they can do to manage that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Let's see here. First up, Addie, right? You've been researching crisis management on a whole.
Yeah.
Tell us what you learned.
Well, I learned like how it can start, like the crisis management life cycle, what that looks like, and I even created a little video for us to watch to get more into it.
We're looking at crisis management as a whole, what it is, and how it's changed over time in social media. Definition. According to TechCrunch, crisis management is the application of strategies designed to help an organization deal with a sudden and significant negative event while maintaining business continuity. Crisis management involves implementing policies and procedures to prevent, mitigate, and prevent a crisis. Crisis management life cycle. According to Timothy Coombs, ongoing crisis communication, planning, managing, and responding. Pre-crisis prevention and preparation. To detecting problems, warning signs, and creating a crisis management plan. Crisis response management and communication. What the organization actually does and says when the crisis hits. Post-crisis recovery and learning. Evaluating how the plan worked and restoring the brand's reputation. Crisis management then and now. According to crisis communication, a casebook approach, before social media and the internet, different businesses had what they called the golden hour before news hit. They could account for gathering all of the facts. Nowadays, with social media and news outlets, there is a new outlet of citizen journalism where an organization will often find out about its own crisis from a viral TikTok or tweet before its internal censors often go off. For the public on these social media forums become the jury and the executioner. With social media being utilized in this way, cancel culture has become a huge part of our everyday life. An example of this is what happened recently with McDonald's or with Taylor Frankie Paul and The Bachelorette. The McDonald's example references the CEO of McDonald's taking a minuscule bite of their new burger and having a tray of their food in front of him and saying that it's delicious. But it just showed that he wasn't even willing to eat the food, which we will debrief more after this video. How often does cancel culture happen? There are four main types of cancel culture we need to think about, which affect businesses, people, and relationships. The call-out, the economic boycott, deplatforming, and social cancelization. These things happen often. According to a Pew Research study, 61% of people have seen businesses or people being publicly canceled on social media. From that same study, people have said that they fear the social cooling effect, where they will censor themselves to avoid being canceled. I have seen many of my own people that I follow fear the same social cooling. This is more about cancel culture and crisis management nowadays. Thanks. From Stratazine, I'm Addie Brazier.
What do y'all think about like the McDonald's like situation as a whole and how they responded to it?
I think that the really interesting thing behind it all was how it just didn't connect with the people in charge, how it was going to be perceived. And I think that that's kind of what ends up happening when it comes to this situation in general, is just like you have people who think, oh yeah, no, that's good, that's fine. And then it, passes through the ranks of like, yeah, no, send it on, keep going. And then what ends up happening is it's just a disaster, especially when it hits the public. And then the public's like, what?
You thought that was good?
Yeah, like, what are you doing? And it just ends up blowing up.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, like, it really is when you see a lot of crisis management situations, like, oh, this could have been prevented from the inside. Like, if it actually, like, went through the proper channels it needs to go through, like, it probably would have been solved before it even became a problem. So it just shows how important that pre-work is when whether you're like a social media person for a company or just like yourself, right? It's so important that you actually take those steps when producing content and putting it out there.
No, for sure. And I wonder if like they go back and they're like, oh, well, we can't stop it now because it's already been produced, like all of these things, or what it was in their minds that like that was such a necessary video to post.
I don't think that they like acted quick enough after the fact because as we all saw, many like companies like Burger King, for example, made like a video almost like making fun of it, but also like showing that their company has good food that they can eat, and the CEO would like obviously take a big bite of it. And McDonald's, I think, could have done something like a funny way to respond, maybe recreating their own video that they did have, or recreating it and actually having the CEO take a big bite like he didn't in the video. But I think it's really important for a company to respond quickly after it, because that is obviously you're going to miss your chance with everyone else like competing around you.
Yeah, and like just like the situation with McDonald's, like the best thing they could have done and had to kind of just do is play into it, because there wasn't like, it was out there, it spiraled, it became big, they just had to deal with it, and like because everyone was making fun of it, it's like they just had to lean into it and just kind of let it happen.
No, literally. I love that you brought up Burger King, Celeste, because like that was, I love how they responded. Like the CEO, like he did the video and then he also like put out his number and he was like, I see that like a lot of CEOs don't actually know what's going on with their company, and let me know, like let me have that response. And so they came out with new advertising. They like they got rid of like their king mascot. They like changed their menu a little bit. They changed their ingredients just so that like the customers were now the king instead, and we were more in charge of what actually goes into their food. And I think that is like such a better example of what they could have done.
Awesome. Thanks, Addie. That's interesting stuff. Really quick story. I remember, I don't know if you guys ever saw this, McDonald's about 15, 20 years ago. There was a video that started circulating. You guys probably weren't even alive, but of the pink meat like globs that's what they use to make chicken nuggets. And then there was a bunch of talk about like why does the pictures of the food always look so much better than when you actually get it, and they actually did a lot of response to that kind of stuff. And it was really fascinating to see kind of just what they did, how they managed it. So they know how to do these things, right?
Literally.
So awesome. Maya, you're up right next with, let's see here, you're talking about crisis due to accountability versus when they turn it into online backlash. Is that, Yeah.
So before researching, I thought I had like a pretty good understanding of how online backlash works, but the more I looked into it, it's like so complex. There's so many different types of situations where people or brands face public backlash and criticism due to like more serious issues like fraud or just scandals in general, to like even more minor things, to maybe something they said that was taken out of context, or just even small issues. So I put a video together to show what I found.
One post, one decision, or even one misunderstanding can quickly turn into a major reputational crisis online. From brand changes like Cracker Barrel to influencers like James Charles and even large campaigns like Balenciaga, backlash can spread fast and be hard to control. So how does it work? A PR crisis happens when public criticism gains enough attention to impact how people see a brand or person, which is why we need to have crisis management. Due to social media, these moments can escalate within minutes. According to Pew Research Center, social media allows information, opinions, and events to spread rapidly and reach large audiences in an instant, so even small situations can grow into something much bigger and fast. There are different types of backlash. According to the Edelman Trust Barometer, audiences today expect brands and public figures to act responsibly and be held accountable when issues arise. In some cases, like major controversies such as Balenciaga and James Charles, backlash is tied to serious concerns where accountability is expected. As for smaller ones, like reactions to brand changes as Cracker Barrel, backlash can escalate quickly, even if the situation is not as serious. When these moments arise, how our brand response is critical. As stated by Harvard Research, transparency and accountability are key to an effective response and timely recovery. Trust plays a major role in how audiences respond to brands during moments of controversy, and as Sprout Social emphasizes, timely and transparent communication is essential when managing crisis online. Here are my sources, and remember that understanding how these situations develop and how to respond to them is key for any brand or creator navigating today's digital space. For Strategene, I'm Maya Store.
So just to give a little bit more context on some examples I provided, Cracker Barrel, as probably a lot of you guys know, faced some backlash after changing their logo, when some people felt like it moved too far away from like their original message and just kind of who they are as a brand. And even though it wasn't a major issue, it still generated a lot of negative reactions online. And on the other hand, as for like Balenciaga, it faced a much more serious situation. They released a campaign that featured like children holding teddy bears and what was like interpreted as really like inappropriate outfits, which raised concerns and led to like a really large, widespread criticism. It escalated really quickly, and they quickly pulled the campaign and did a huge public apology. So they're very two different situations, but both still turn into major backlash online. So how do you think brands should handle situations depending on the seriousness? And do you think the public reaction in each of these cases was justified?
Yeah, I would say, especially in the second one, is really justified. I feel like with you mentioning in your video, the ones where it's the accountability, I feel like those, they really need to be very quick with how they respond to it, especially putting out the apology, just showing people how genuine they are. And then the ones for Cracker Barrel, I feel like they were a little bit quicker than McDonald's was in that regard, where once they got that feedback back, they were able to kind of look at themselves a little bit more and understand that they wanted to focus on those key values still. And so I feel like for both of those, they did a little better than McDonald's in that regard. But
yeah, I think especially like the Cracker Barrel one kind of reminds me of Burger King, where it's like they really like, obviously Burger King, it wasn't like their own problem, but they took it. But like Cracker Barrel really listened, like, okay, this is what people want, so I'm gonna actually listen and like completely backtrack, which is probably they lost tons of money because they changed a ton of signs, they changed their logo on everything, and they had people design that, they paid people to do all that stuff. But at the end of the day, they're like, this is the better decision in the long run, because just actually listening to the public and taking accountability for the change that I decided to do, which is interesting.
No, for sure. I feel like we talked about this a little bit earlier, just like all press is good press. And with that, we have to realize that like Cracker Barrel was trying to get that press out there and to like try and keep up with the times. But that brand is so nostalgic, and that's why people love it. And so it allowed for people to come back and be like, no, like I do like this brand. I like this little store. I like this sign. I like that barrel on it. And it allowed for them to get their customer base back up. And so even though it started out bad, because they did respond in such a good way and they did take accountability, they were able to end better than they started out.
And that's why I think it is okay for a brand to make a mistake, because obviously they can learn from it and learn what the public wants from them. But obviously they do need to come back and take accountability. But I don't think like every crisis is like a bad crisis. Obviously, like some positive can come out of it.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about this earlier too. It's like a lot of times with like influencers, the accountability is where it's lost, right? It's a lot of like the blame game. I didn't actually do this, that person did this, it's out of context. Like you just don't know, where it's like a lot of times the better move is just to like, this is what happened. Even if it got taken in a way I didn't expect it to, like this is how I'm going forward, this is how I'm fixing it, like this is my apology, right? And that's just kind of like the best way to go about it in those situations.
Definitely. And I think that with companies especially, it's so different than an influencer, and that's why the public has much more of a reaction to a company, because I feel like there's this understanding that a company and not an influencer will have this book or the system that they like go by at every single day and with whatever they do. And then when they see a company do the same thing that an influencer would do, they're like, what's going on? So I definitely think that accountability is really, really big, especially with big business.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially with like the Taylor Frankie Paul situation. It was like a bit of both, right? It's an influencer involved with a major company, The Bachelorette, and like how The Bachelorette handled it is definitely not how probably Taylor Frankie Paul would have handled it herself. Like again, they lost a ton of money canceling an entire season that was already pre-filmed and done and everything was worked for, but they felt after everything happened that was the better decision, and that was them taking accountability for what had happened, even though it necessarily wasn't them directly. So it's just interesting.
Definitely.
This is why I love talking about this kind of stuff, because I mean, you use the Cracker Barrel example. Do you guys remember Gap a couple years ago? They also tried to do a rebrand, and they went from kind of their sans serif or their serif logo to a sans serif, and they kind of did. They had to do the same thing. They got a ton of backlash, and then they went back to the previous one. I think the last day had, if I remember right, like 5 days, kind of stuff. And so, looking to the back and learning and seeing what other people have done in the past can really help us, right? So, Celeste, you kind of have been looking into how do brands, how can they recover faster when it comes to a crisis management situation?
Yes, I've been learning all about the best ways that a brand can use crisis management to keep their brand in a positive light. So I've put together a video that explains these tips and also shows us real-world examples to learn from. So let's check it out. Today, we're going to discuss how to recover your brand after crisis. We will also look at real-world examples to see what we can learn from them. In order to recover a crisis, you need to be able to identify the crisis quickly. You should keep a constant awareness of negative feedback so you can catch it early. When you do face negative feedback, you should respond fast. Timely communication helps minimize the tension. This information can be found on medium.com. A good example of a brand responding quickly to crisis is Slack. They faced a huge outage on their messaging platform and users were unable to access it. But Slack had timely communication, giving updates every half hour, and left a sincere apology on Twitter. This information can be found on brandbastion.com. After a crisis, your brand should use social media for good. Open conversation can help lead feedback into a positive direction, but you should never use it to get heated and argue against negative comments. You should always respond respectfully. This information can be found on medium.com. The Nestle crisis is a great example of what not to do. When Greenpeace launched a negative social media campaign against them, they automatically just tried to get the post taken down. They argued back on Facebook. This made users angry, and the only way Nestle could resolve it was to begin addressing concerns respectfully. This information can be found on ft.com. And finally, implement changes. Take feedback so you can keep your audience satisfied. This information can be found on socialtargeter.com. For Stratazine, I'm Celeste Taylor. So, what did you guys learn from the brand examples that I gave in the video?
I think just overall, if you want your customers, don't argue with them. I think that's a very plain, good rule to follow. It's just, if you want that brand trust, if you want that brand loyalty, if you are fighting with them in the comments, they're not going to stay. Simple as that.
I feel like I talked to my grandma yesterday on the phone, and we were talking about this actually, how with social media and all the things online, reviews and things like that, when a company does something that my grandma doesn't like, she just can leave a review or just decide not to go there. And so I feel like now with social media, companies have to be even more careful what they say or do and how they respond to it, just to ensure that they keep those customers coming back.
Yeah, I think if somebody leaves a negative review or a negative take and the brand obviously comes back and kind of blames you for the negative take, I think that's just the worst thing you can do, because that's going to make them not feel welcome to come back or even voice their own opinions. I think it's really important to take opinions seriously and take them respectfully, because that's how you build your business in the best way. Obviously, we talked about Slack in this video. In the Slack, they had a huge outage and they were able to recover quickly because they automatically put out a statement. I don't know if you guys have TikTok, but in the past 2 months since they got a new CEO, they've had 2 major outages and they haven't come out with very many statements. And I just think that's the worst thing you can do. I don't know if you guys have heard of that.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of that. I think that's what I was gonna say, is with Slack, it was just how quickly backlash can build. That's why it's so important for companies and businesses and just even people to be able to respond just as quickly, because it's happening all at once so fast. And even with tone of voice, right, within these companies, it's there's some issues that require they can still be a little bit playful on a response, where it's and then there's situations where they need to, even though it's that's maybe not how the company usually is, they need to have that seriousness. They need to come out and have these good responses, because that's what leads to continual trust from consumers and from people that like these brands and trust these brands. But if they don't do that, then they lose that accountability that we all expect from them.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say, is that when you build trust in a way that, you're respectful to the customer, especially when they have concerns, it adds to that accountability. And no one in any situation, when faced with a brand who has let you down or shocked you or done something to change, wants to then be told oh, well, you're the one that's freaking out, you're the one who needs to calm down or whatever. And instead, the brand, like Slack should do, is take accountability and then make sure that they understand that, hey, we want you guys to be in on the conversation. So, like, what do you see? How can we help? And it just really, I think that propels business. And it kind of goes back to what Addie was saying about all press is good press, and how even within crisis, I feel like you can really even like solidify your consumer base. Because if you take accountability and you really build that trust, then those people are going to look back at the situation in more situations that happen, because crisis will happen always. And I think that they'll be able to look back at that experience and be like, it's fine. They've taken care of me before, they'll take care of me again.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm also going to throw in there. I think it depends on the topic and what you're talking about, right? I remember a couple years ago, Disney they came out and they wanted to oppose a bill that was trying to be passed in Florida, and they got some backlash for that, and they kind of came out afterwards and said, hey, we're here to try and make magic for everyone, and we felt that this bill was going to hinder that. And that's like part of their core message. Do you know what I mean? And so sometimes, I mean, like listening to your customers, that is the right way to go.
Yeah.
But if it's part of your brand, your core identity as a brand, as that kind of stuff, you have to stick with it, right? And sometimes it's not always the most popular thing, but it might be the right thing in the long run. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
So Taylor, you've been looking at platforms and how they kind of amplify stuff.
Yeah, especially with kind of crisis management. So like we see a lot of things like with COVID and those things. I'll talk a little bit about it in this video, but just how the algorithm will boost it when it is more controversy.
Social media platforms crisis management. Today we're looking at how social media shapes crisis situations and why controversy spreads so fast. So this graphic shares things how like Instagram, TikTok, and other algorithms, they're designed to have that engagement when there is something that's controversial or a lot of emotion is tied to it, so more people see it. So you see a lot of those things with like politics or anything where there's very polar opposite opinions, especially just about a person or policies. Even if they may not be following the issue a lot, it can become pretty polarized that way. Next, of course, according to the research from MIT, false or emotionally charged content spreads significantly faster than factual information during high-stress events. And so this leads to what experts call monetization of outrage, where platforms profit from attention, even if the attention comes from conflict or misinformation. And so right here we see sources like the Pew Research Center highlight a growing debate. Should platforms stay neutral or step in during crisis to limit harmful content? So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And some platforms have introduced fact-checking labels. So you see it a lot with like Facebook or Instagram, where it says this may have been checked by fact checkers to prove that it's not true, or maybe it's kind of on the fence. So ultimately, social media can inform but also intensify the crises. So the challenge is really balancing the expression that you can have and freedom of speech, while also making sure that you intervene when there may be other issues. And these are my sources that I had. And my name's Tyler Cox from Strategy.
Yeah, and so I explained a few things in there kind of related to politics, COVID, kind of the fact checkers on there. But what are some examples you guys have seen of some of the ways that social media has been used to fuel different controversy?
Something that like my parents and my dad especially is very adamant on is like, check your sources. Like if I see something on social media that I'm like, oh, that kind of piqued my interest, or wow, this is an issue that is interesting, I'm not going to take that and immediately, not that you should like argue in general, but like even take that into an argument with someone or a discussion with someone, because you don't know. It's like, so if I see something, I'm always like, okay, now let me go actually search this up, research it, find like sources and be like, oh, okay, that's actually true, or oh, this was taken way out of context and that's not true at all. But it is crazy to see how, due to the algorithm, like so much can happen, and so many, like you might just see one entire side of something and miss the completely other side and be like, yeah, misinformed and have an argument that doesn't even have legs to stand on. It's crazy.
No, so true. And I feel like so many times nowadays people will take whatever they see on like TikTok or Instagram and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening, and like this is absolute fact, and you're like, no. So like just like you said, Maya, like you absolutely have to go and check your sources.
Yeah, and with that, I think want to talk a little bit about the platform's responsibility. So in regards to freedom of speech and also their responsibility, what role do you think the platforms have in regulating and monitoring the content, especially when those platforms might have a large reach or an audience that may be easily persuaded a different way? What do you think their responsibility is?
Well, I think huge right now is like there's a lot of fear mongering online, right? Just about anything. If anything happens, it's like this is the worst of the worst and this is gonna happen, the world's gonna explode. Like it just feels like every situation kind of leads to like that final. And I think it there should be a responsibility there at the end of the day to like, you know, step in and be like, this is not like productive content to be putting out there. This is not like if something's not as factual, again, like there obviously are levels for freedom of speech, but like there should be a level of like this is not 100% true, or this doesn't have all the facts backed up, or this, you know, because it causes people into a panic and it causes people into fights, and it can make certain situations, like even with like companies and brands with backlash, it can just make them blow up more than it even needs to be, right?
Yeah, and I think social media has like regarding people in specific, I think social media has a responsibility to protect its creators. And I think when a creator is like going through a scandal, sometimes the comments can get crazy and like blown out of proportion, even though people don't even know what's happening with that particular person. I just think people like jump on the bandwagon of hating sometimes. And so I think sometimes like comments need to be regulated and the social media platforms need to be aware of when crises are happening so that they can regulate it online.
And I feel like Instagram, I've even seen recently a lot of like they have their folded comments now for comments that are kind of like maybe like have certain language or just rude, and it's like iffy. Yeah, just like they've even taken that step to like kind of start doing that a bit.
Yeah, and I think even that with freedom of speech, it's not like they're just going through and deleting all those comments, but they are putting them in a section where it's like, hey, these might not have the best language or they might not be the most factual. So they're still giving them the opportunity to express their opinions, but also not broadcasting it in a way to push it in front of everyone.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think that the big thing that we need to start holding these companies accountable to, especially, is with AI, especially when it comes to controversy, because you know, you can put anyone on anybody's face and make them do anything now. And so you have these like AI videos of people showing that they're doing this thing that they never actually did. And then because people don't always have, you know, the best well-trained eye, they end up just believing that it's true and they don't fact check. And I think that that's what they definitely need to be working on now, if they haven't already. Because I mean, I know that there's definitely those like banners that you'll see on a reel or, you know, maybe a post in general that's like, hey, this may be AI generated content. But I think that the regulation needs to go a little bit further than that.
Yeah,
for sure.
This gets hard too because business-wise, it gets into some laws and like who do you hold accountable for those kinds of things. So traditionally in the past, social media platforms have said they're not the ones publishing this, and so they're not responsible. And there's some laws out there that have kind of protected them, at least in the United States, right? And so you have that side of things, but you also have the side of things. I don't know if you guys saw this week, Meta just and YouTube got sued for several $1 million for creating platforms that were addicted to kids or addicting to kids. And even Meta was, I think it was somewhere around 300 million or something like that. They knew about kids being sexually exploited on their platforms, but didn't do anything about it. And so we're starting to see that now more and more. But also recently, Meta just stopped their fact checking, and now it's just they're relying on comments. From what I read, and at least. So, you know, it's kind of an interesting, it all deals with laws. The EU gets in there and they treat things differently versus the United States and that kind of stuff. And it's hard when you're dealing with something that's a global, there's no real borders, right? Because people could be posting in other countries. I mean, we saw that with the start of the Russia, when Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean, they were paying influencers in Russia to basically do propaganda. And so, you know, it's hard, and where do you draw that line, and how do you keep them accountable? I think that's all stuff that has to be talked about and so on. But sorry, me getting off topic a little bit. But let's see here, Colton, you're up next. What did you research?
I found how to break down the impact of reputation in business during a crisis and how it determines whether it recovers or basically falls apart. Let's check it out.
When a company faces public backlash, one of the biggest things at risk isn't just sales, it's reputation. And that reputation directly impacts how shareholders and investors view the company's future. According to Harvard Business Review, companies can lose significant market value within days of a public crisis. When a brand's reputation is damaged, trust declines, not just with customers, but with investors who rely on stability and long-term growth. Forbes explains that companies facing backlash often see drops in stock because investors fear long-term damage to the brand and future earnings. Companies must respond with transparency. Being honest and taking responsibility can help rebuild credibility with both customers and investors. Speed matters. Deloitte emphasizes that delayed responses can make a crisis worse than significantly increasing financial loss. Consistent communication helps reassure shareholders and leadership is in control and has a clear plan for moving forward. When companies handle crises well, they don't just recover, they can actually rebuild stronger trust over time, emerging with a more loyal customer and investor base. Reputation, trust, and communication are what determine whether a company survives a crisis or falls because of it. Transparency, speed, and consistency are the keys to crisis management. For Stratazine, this is Colton Brillhart.
So my first question is, if you were an investor, would you pull out of a company during a crisis or wait and see how they respond?
I think it depends on obviously the crisis to an extent. Like if it's something that like, me as an investor, maybe I heavily feel like strong about, maybe even before, like I feel like sometimes there's just like a company would do something, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of it for me. Like no matter the response, there's no going back. Like it's like, that's just kind of like, you've left a bad taste in my mouth as a company and it's just not really for me anymore. But
I think as well, like, just like you brought up, like the transparency of it all, if like you don't think you can like trust that influencer or trust that business that you're partnered with or anything anymore, then why would you want to be in business with them at all? And so I think that based on like your personal brand values and like the overall effect that influencer has on like its community, and if you want to be aligned with them anymore, absolutely, like I would pull out 100%.
Definitely. And I guess a better question would be, what would it be basically that would happen for you as an investor to pull out of a company? What's the situation? How much time would you give them if they responded poorly to then respond again?
I mean, I feel like influencers is such a big one. Like you'll see how quickly a brand like will pull from an influencer after like being their biggest advocate for a long time just because of something that could have been taken out of proportion. So I think it is important for investors to be able to take a step back and make sure like, okay, is this legit? Let me look at all sides. But then also they have to kind of sometimes keep their best interest in mind, unfortunately, in this space. And that's just kind of how it is. And as you were talking about in the video, like reputation is so important. And that's why branding is so important because branding is what builds that reputation. So if you don't, as a company or as a, influencer or whatever, if you don't have a good brand, if you don't have good branding and a good response to like when something's gonna happen, like yeah, you're gonna lose that completely. And I think it can really hurt your own brand for anyone. So
I think that the brand needs to know what they're getting into with like an influencer. I think sometimes brands kind of don't do as much research as they should. Like for example, The Bachelorette with Taylor Frankie Paul, obviously her video came out with like abuse and like her getting arrested, things like that. But that has been public information that she got arrested, but they still asked her to be the Bachelorette. So that was almost a risk that they were taking on their own.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but they pulled out automatically when everyone was giving them that backlash. So I think sometimes they need to listen to early backlash because she did have early backlash when she was first announced. And you need to
Yeah.
listen to what your audience is saying, because otherwise that's going to bite you later on.
Yeah, I mean, even before that video came out, they were getting backlash because she was like posting so many like teasers that like wasn't even supposed to be out because the show hadn't even started. Like it's just like, yeah, there's a level of like there should have been further research done because like she's been a controversial person from like the beginning of her career.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think the key thing that makes some people want to pull out or leave a company or influencer is if they're consistent with those problems. Like that first backlash, if they quickly fixed it, then you would be like, okay, like maybe I'll still give them a chance. But when they do it multiple times in a row, that's at least when I'm like, okay, maybe I won't be part of that anymore.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Great discussion, everyone, today. Thanks for all those that tuned in. And yeah, this is the wrap of another podcast. Check back on our YouTube channel, Strategies YouTube channel. I can talk today. And for other content about social media and digital media. Thanks.